We're joined now by the Senior Fellow at the Center for Democracy and Development, Professor Jibrin Ibrahim, and Arise legal analyst Frank Tietie. Gentlemen, good to see you both, and thanks for your time. Let's quickly start with Frank, because I recall when that incursion into Judge's home occurred, your organization spoke and wrote specifically on that. That actually marked many years back down the line in our judicial journey. Speak to us about some of the key things as highlighted by Godfrey in his report.
Oh, well, the judiciary has always been independent, but not so independent. The reason is, in practice, you'll find the judiciary relying so much on the executive for money that it spends, the budget that it makes. It also relies on the executive to enforce its own judgment, so you don't call that judicial independence. It was a very low moment when the DSS invaded Judge's home in 2016. It was a reminiscence of the dark days of the military. And to think that that was just 1 year after President Muhammadu Buhari had come into office, himself being a military man, it was traumatizing for the entire judiciary. There was serious trepidation among the community of judges at that time. And that was when the NJC was holding spirited meetings to ensure that it reclaimed its integrity. That was very unnecessary, because the judiciary to date has not recovered from it. And there is a tacit a thing going on among the judicial community that the executive is against it, and when it has its way, it will take a pound of flesh for what it did, the executive did to it in 2016. The judiciary has been plagued with a lot of problems, especially with the fact that the all-important electoral cases are now being determined most times by just a handful of 3 judges who form a panel in the tribunal, and then the Court of Appeal together with the Supreme Court. And we've had a lot of bizarre decisions coming out from the judiciary that are inexplicable in the eyes of the common man. However, it would have been better if the judiciary was left out of the electoral process, and the Waste Committee report would have actually put paid to a lot of the problems we are witnessing right now facing the judiciary. We now see an increasing demand for the judiciary to not determine who becomes president, who becomes governor, irrespective of the fact that we have poorly conducted elections, which also confer a sort of political power on anybody who has been declared. And then the latest mantra now in town is go to court, just go to court. However you want to get the power, just get it, and then it's left for the losers to go to court. Let them just go to court.
All right, let's bring in Professor Jibrin Ibrahim. Good to see you. I mean, you were part of the Ways panel that came up with far-reaching reports. Give us a peep into the vital aspects of the Ways report that really should have addressed the present-day challenges that we're experiencing now with our electoral processes.
Well, I think the first issue we emphasized was the independence of INEC itself. Essentially, we made the point that it has to have a chairman and national commissioners who go through a process that's open and competitive. We suggested a panel be established, and that people apply for these positions, and that the people who apply submit their curriculum not just to the panel but to the Nigerian public, that there is a national debate on them, and during that debate, those who are, for example, found to be not politically neutral can be dropped. Those who are not competent, it will become clear, and they will be dropped. It's after that initial process of pruning down CVs that the selection process will go to the National Judicial Council, where a final selection will be made, and that is what goes to the president for approval. So that's the first thing, that we want, as Nigerian citizens, to know who is going to INEC, to know their character, their background, their political neutrality. The second issue we tackled was that of accountability. And the point about accountability is that we noted in our work that almost nobody is ever prosecuted for electoral crimes. At the same time, we knew a lot of electoral crimes were being committed. The suggestion, therefore, was to set up an electoral offenses commission, which would be a specialized court that will promptly handle all cases of electoral crime coming out of the electoral process. We feel a specialized court will be much more competent and focused in handling such crimes efficiently and quickly. The third key issue we raised related to the whole question of why is it that you have cases in court, the cases have not been settled from the elections, and yet people are sworn in as governors or legislators. We suggested that elections take place 7 months before swearing in, and all the cases be resolved within 6 months, both at the tribunal and at the appeal court, so that at the end of that 6 months, you have people who have cleared their way and established in court that they are genuine winners who are sworn in. And the reasoning for that is also straightforward. You take governors, for example, who are in electoral tribunals. They have a lot of advantage because they have the power of the state, they have the resources of the state to pay for their lawyers. They are already in a position that's very unfair vis-a-vis the other litigants that are contesting their victory in court. To make sure there is equality between all litigants with electoral cases, let nobody be sworn in till the matter of who is duly elected is established by the courts, and that therefore, once you are sworn in, you know you are going in for 4 years, and there's no argument over your claim that you are indeed the elected person for that position.
Professor Jibrin, I'm excited that you've been able to take us back in time to recount some of these key points. Well, thanks for your time. We're still with you. Let me bring in Frank. And Frank, I also recall that the number of tribunals were also suggested to be increased by reducing the number of judges that sit on the tribunal from 5 to 3, which means that the more tribunals can be established per state. Now, going back, looking at what happened in our journey, we lost President Yaradua, who activated this committee, and President Jonathan threw it back to the National Assembly for those specifically that will need, the backing of the law. Speak to us, Frank, if these novel suggestions by the learned people who sat over this matter can be done by politicians we have elected to represent us.
Well, I think let's start by acknowledging that many of the recommendations of the Owais report were actually adopted, and we see them reflected in the current 2022 Electoral Act. Interestingly, the key areas were rejected by that same government, not necessarily by the Nigerian people. And this is not an imposition by a foreign government on us, but by ourselves, for ourselves, and for ourselves. Now, the idea is that those who run government, like I emphasized previously, is that they want to maximize their opportunities, their shot at control of state resources for personal reasons. That is the only reason why a people will ever say that wherever anybody captures power by hook or crook, by vote buying, by electoral violence, by manipulation, by making servers not to work, by causing the IREV not to work, by ensuring that INEC fails, and then he gets one way or the other to be declared, will first of all be returned and then be sworn in and remain for a minimum of about 10 months before ever there will be a determination. That kind of sinister, standard to be set and imposed on us by ourselves, it's inexplicable. But that is who we are, and that is what we wanted. Now, despite the fact that there was a report by some wise men who made it clear to us that this is the right thing to do, we have decided to throw that overboard. However, there had been some justification for that people should not be left without government at any time. But look at what the recommendations made. Professor Jibrin referred to 7 months elections before, elections held 7 months before inauguration or swearing in. That was also jettisoned. So there is a deliberate measure, a deliberate attempt by the ruling class to ensure that it perpetuates itself in feeding from the state resources. And I close on that note by saying that unless we work at, because this is something the Waste Report didn't also address very well, unless we work at disincentivizing politics, because politics now happens to be the surest, fastest way for those who have perfected their ways in brigandage or buffoonery to find their way to government house and then, pilfer state funds and then lord it over those who have painstakingly worked at upholding standards of good governance or good citizenship. So unless we disincentivize this kind of politics that glorifies mediocrity as we have it in Nigeria, that ensures that people get rich overnight by stealing, outright stealing, we will continue to have this kind of problem. So that's why they will go there. That's why they will, standardize and institutionalize electoral violence as a means of, stealing the people's mandate. Professor Jibrin knows better because I have taken time to look at his book that he co-authored with Idayat Hassan, From Direct Capture to Protection to Mandate Protection, where they bemoaned the problem of election being the real problem of Nigeria, forgetting that the real people who cause problems for Nigerians are most times not really elected. Those who run the bureaucracy, the federal civil servants, the state civil servants, those who implement policies and formulate policies and implement them, the ones who actually cause real hardship for Nigerians, they are not actually elected. So in addition to the fact that we have an electoral debacle, which is a basic problem in Nigeria, we still have a people who have a culture of oppressing themselves, of ensuring that they don't make progress so that they can have easy life at the expense of the majority of Nigerians who suffer in the midst of plenty.
So, Professor Jibrin, how do we now change this culture of maybe impunity, for lack of a better word, that seems to reflect in every aspect of our lives, whether it's the judiciary you're talking about, our politics, and what have you? Let me quote what Bishop Kuka said to the judiciary. Let's address the issue of the judiciary now. He says, look, the courts have been invaded by the political class, and a lot hangs on the deliberations of the judiciary as, the post-election litigations are being handled right now. How do we ensure that, the judiciary, the INEC, the, electoral umpire, and all other stakeholders that will protect this democracy are actually empowered in a way that they actually can do it?
I think it's very clear in this country that all areas of our society are affected by very high levels of corruption. And the reason why there is so much corruption in our society is that people who are corrupt do not get punished. There are no consequences for their acts of corruption. You see people who go and steal tens of billions, and at the end they negotiate an agreement, and maybe 10% of the loot is collected from them, and they have the pleasure of spending the rest of their lives enjoying stolen money. The way forward has always been to improve accountability mechanisms by making sure more and more people who engage in corruption get prosecuted and spend time in jail. There's no two-way around it. The moment leaders who are engaged in corruption start spending time in jail, the issue of corruption will begin to go down dramatically. I feel it is a national tragedy that the judiciary, which has this responsibility for adjudication, it has also been as affected as other parts of society, and it accounts for a lot of the very funny judgments we've been seeing in recent years. There is increasing belief in this country that many judges are available for sale, and there's even a Nigerian term called Jankara judgment, where you pay for a judgment. And I think if that is not addressed immediately, then it becomes almost impossible to do anything about the high level of corruption that's destroying the capacity of the Nigerian state to provide the services the Nigerian people expect and indeed deserve from that state. I'm one of those who believe it is possible to improve delivery by the judiciary. I think it is important that the type of soft exit that the National Judicial Council provides for judges implicated in corruption must stop immediately. The National Judicial Council has to stop protecting corrupt judges and subject them to the same standards that other citizens are or should be subjected to. Once you stop this soft approach to corrupt judges, then the judges will start sitting up because their reputation becomes at stake, and in particular, they have to understand they cannot become extremely wealthy through selling of Jankara judgments and live to enjoy the loot they have taken through corruption. That's the only way out as far as I understand it.
All right, that's a very good place to leave it. Very instructive there. Professor Jibrin Ibrahim is Senior Fellow, Center for Democracy and Development. And of course, Frank Tietie is a lawyer and a Rise News analyst. Thank you, both of you gentlemen, for joining us on Newsnight tonight.